Hello, seekers, wonderful human beings, beautiful incarnated souls. We are back to look into the Tao Te King and its interpretation by Vian Den Groot. So today we are going to look into chapter 4 and 5. So let me start by reading the classic translation from the website taoism.net, which is quite well done. So, chapter 4. The Tao is empty. When utilized, it is not filled up. So deep, it seems to be the source of all things. It blunts the sharpness, unravels the knots, dims the glare, mixes the dusts, so indistinct. It seems to exist. I do not know whose offspring it is. Its image is the predecessor of the emperor. Chapter 5. Heaven and earth are impartial. They regard myriad things as straw dogs. The sages are impartial. They regard people as straw dogs. The space between heaven and earth, is it not like a bellows, empty and yet never exhausted? It moves and produces more. Too many words hasten failure. Cannot compare to keeping to the void. So that might be a little bit hermetic to many. Let's see if the Vian Den Groot interpretation sheds some light on the subject behind those poetic yet quite precise sentences. So this is now from Vian Den Groot's Tao of Lao-Tzu, as published in 2019, but written between 2017 and 2019. So, Chapter 4, the source mystery. The source is unfathomable, black holy. The nameless, boundless, eternal and unchanging darkness within darkness is filled with dense nothingness, yet is always emptying itself of light, darkness, space, and objects. Like an ancient well, always used but never exhausted. It is infinitely deep, cannot be emptied nor filled. It is the source and destination of all, subject and objects. It pervades all of creation, yet remains imperceptible at all times, but now. Like the reality behind the concepts of oneness or infinity, whose child can it be? Chapter 5. The Mysterious Trinity. The subject is the witness of life. All objects, dense and subtle, flow and ebb mechanically, without rest or subjective object, throughout heaven and earth. Emotion arrests and the opposite motion. Without emotion nor object, except for the subjective mind, always naming forms of objects and forming names to subject. The subjective mind invents positive and negative attributes for all objects, conceptually dividing and polarizing subject into personalities, now into times, and forming the impossible objective of separating oneself and the yin and yang of creation. The Masterful One remains in the center of now, subjectively absent to the objects, objectively present to the subject, dancing within and without creation, yin and yang. He knows it takes three to tango, as an eye in the center of now. Well, so I don't know if you followed, but let me comment a little bit and possibly give you one or two clarifications that may help you in your meditation on these paragraphs 4 and 5 of the Tao Te King. In chapter 4, basically, Vian Den Groot likens the Tao, in fact the universe or the creation, to a black hole, a torus vortex. And for those of you familiar with the mathematics of a vortex, or rather a torus, it's really quite peculiar. It's a 2D object that occupies a 3D volume. It's really, it has the notion of infinity, both in the 2 and 3 dimensions. And of course, this image is just that, an image, as reality is multi-dimensional beyond 3 or 4 or 5 dimensions. And the human mind is not capable of conceptualizing beyond 4 or at best 5 dimensions. But of course it will still try. It will form concepts, imperfect concepts, simplifications, simplistic visualizations and images, cartoonish visions of what the universe may be in one's mind. So that's why Vian Den Groot paraphrases Lao-Tzu by saying, the nameless, boundless, eternal and unchanging darkness within darkness is filled with dense nothingness, yet is always emptying itself of light, darkness, space and objects. Like an ancient well, never always used, but never exhausted. Those of you familiar with wells, the actual wells where water is drawn from, will know that the more you use it, the more it keeps drawing water actually from the reserve of water in the ground. And if you stop using a well, it can sometimes clog. But the more you keep drawing, and the more water seeps through its sides to fill it again. So this is an analogy. It was very pertinent in ancient times. Of course, nowadays, most of you have never used a well. But I continue. It is infinitely deep, like a black hole. Cannot be emptied nor filled, like a black hole. It is the source and destination of all. This we tie in with certain theories around black holes that likens them to a quasar, which is like a black hole but does spurt plasma of light and matter. Plasma being equivalent to a four-dimensional object. It would be like the fourth state of matter from our physical perspective. It is the source and destination of all subject and objects. Okay, here Vian Den Groot distinguishes and plays on the words object and subject. The object sometimes being used to refer to material objects or the appearance of material objects in creation, and sometimes being used in its other meaning, which is the object of a discussion. We would say the subject of a discussion, but subject as well is used in its various assertions of being the character of a story, for example, the subject. Also the subject by opposition to the ruler. In a kingdom, there is the ruler and its subjects, the king and his subjects, and also the subject matter of a discussion. So here, Vian Den Groot really uses in a very rich way the various meanings of both the word subject and object, and combines it with the mathematical and geometric definition of a vortex torus shape to try to give a glimpse to the reader about the nature of reality, being both a dream but also a kind of holographic projection in multi-dimensional that appears multi-dimensional but is really beyond that. And the last two sentences, or it's really one sentence, like the reality behind the concepts of oneness or infinity, whose child can it be? Meaning, first of all, that when we talk of oneness or infinity, we actually conceptualize these things as being understandable, while they are way beyond understanding by the mind, but they are plain to see with your third eye, in a way. And the last bit, whose child can it be? Who could possibly have created this reality, this black holy Tao that is all that is, which comes from a mysterious source, an unfathomable black holy source. So here Vian Den Groot does a word play on black hole and holiness. And then we continue with the 5th chapter, which is still in the same vein, using the same play on words, but giving it a different perspective. The subject is the witness of life, the mysterious trinity that is introduced here and that is mentioned again at the end is it takes three to tango. So, you know, the expression is it takes two to tango, but in the reality of duality, people see the duality, but they forget that there is a witness to the duality, and that makes it actually three and not two. And Vian Den Groot insists on the notion of wholeness compared to separation, and on the notion of movement and rest and opposite motion. So let me read again here. All objects, dense and subtle, flow and ebb mechanically, without rest or subjective object, throughout heaven and earth. Emotion, arrest, and the opposite motion, without emotion nor object, except for the subjective mind, always naming forms of objects and forming names to subject. So really the reality is a single thing that is not a thing. So it's extremely complex to understand with the mind, but it's extremely simple to just see with spirit, or not with, to see as spirit, or to see as consciousness rather. But the mind will always step in and try to form concepts, to name forms into objects and giving it names to subject. Here the word subject is used in its meaning of subjecting people to your will or to your fantasies. So let me continue. The subjective mind invents positive and negative attributes for all objects. We go back to chapter 2 or 3 where we talk of comparison being the process of suffering through judgment and condemnation. Conceptually dividing and polarizing subject into personalities. So the moment you distinguish an object, you want to subject it and give it a personality. I will give an image to illustrate this process. So subject into personalities, now into times. So we deconstruct the present moment into the concept of time with past, present, and future, where present is reduced to nothing and past is considered very big and future very big, while the reality is the other way around. There is only present, and past and future are just ideas. So, and forming the impossible objective of separating oneself. So when you invent an identity and you want to try to separate it as oneself, separate from the yin and yang of creation, it's an impossible undertaking, and that's the source of most, if not all, misery. So the masterful one remains in the center of now. So this is the solution to avoid all this suffering. To remain in the center of now, to remain absolutely present as consciousness. The masterful one remains in the center of now, subjectively absent to the objects. So not being subjective, but being objective. Objectively present to the subject. So very focused on the reality of the only reality, that is the Tao or the universe or God or love, as you want. It's a single thing, so you can name it whatever you want. dancing within and without creation, yin and yang. So it's beyond duality, beyond creation. He knows, the Masterful One knows, it takes three to tango. So he knows that life is a dance, a conceptual dance, a dream, where you divide yourself, oneness, into two, actually three. The witness of the separation into two, the separation of oneself and the rest of the universe as two separate things, but still observed by the third eye. That third eye who is in the center of the storm, still and omitting oneself, omitting itself, and watching the universe or creation as a dual reality of I and thou, I and the rest. I am a separate being in the creation. But most people forget there is a consciousness observing all that. So now I'll give you that image I used a couple of times to help some friends understand this process of conceptualizing reality into falseness. So the analogy I give is of a child or a person watching the sky, and let's say that unlike today here in Qatar, where there is absolutely not a single cloud in the sky, as you can see, in this analogy, the child or the person looks at the sky and there are clouds there. And then looking at the clouds, he sees or thinks he sees the shape of a dog. And then he decides this dog has a name. It is Fido. And he's moving, and he's alive, and he's a good dog. Oh, but no, look. He's getting old, he's disaggregating, he's dying, and suddenly he's not there anymore. The sky has moved, the cloud has changed shape, and there's no dog anymore. So the dog was born, and then he died. He was born, he was a good dog, and then maybe he became a bad dog, or maybe he just got old and died. So this is really the process of the mind inventing a separate being in the sky, and then so that being is born in the mind, and then it's given a name, it's given attributes, and it dies. And of course, in reality, there was no dog, there's no separate entity there. It's just a fantasy built from the apparent shape of one portion of the universe, seen from a certain perspective at a certain moment. And that is really the analogy for how we as human beings incarnated, or so we think, that's how we come up with our own existence, being born as a separate entity, a separate human being, and then evolving, and then decaying and dying. But the reality is not so, at least according to the Tao Te King and according to most enlightened or incarnated masters, rather. So this is my take on these paragraphs 4 and 5. I'm sorry I maybe spoke a little bit fast and mixing a lot of things, but That's the impossibility of the Tao, as we saw in the first paragraph. So you have feel free to listen to this episode at a slower speed of when you watch a YouTube video, you can reduce or accelerate the speed. You can also pause, you can read again, meditate, observe how you feel about all this and how you see things from your consciousness point of view. Meditation is a state of relaxation in which you simply observe what is, and you will see clarity happens by itself. This video is only going to give you a little bit of an excuse to do this yourself. It's not meant to explain reality or even the Tao Te King to you. It's really meant to encourage you to meditate and give yourself permission to silently observe and see for yourself the nature of reality. And then you will see the Tao Te King and every other scripture will be very clear and simple to you. I wish you very fruitful and enjoyable and joyful meditation. And until next time, I say goodbye, au revoir, hasta la vista, sayonara, auf Wiedersehen, bye bye.